How about I unpack and you detangle? Lazy dog.
Anyway, did you get that proposal yet? Okay, good. Can you do me a favor? Give it a good look over. Hang on a second. Here. Give Dad just a minute. Anyway, did you get that proposal yet? Okay, good. Can you do me a favor? Give it a good look over.
Almost. There. Tis the season.
Great to have you here for part 2 of our series, Reasons for the Season. And something you may or may not know about me is I'm a DIY guy, like a do-it-yourself type of guy. I hate to pay to have anything done if it's possible that I can figure out how to do it myself. Are there anybody who can relate to that? Any fix-it-yourself, DIY, do-it-yourself type of people? Like a couple of people are like, yay. Well, that's something that's very true about me. Partly, honestly, can I be honest, it's because I'm a cheapskate. It really is. I hate to pay for stuff that I might be able to do myself, but I'm also really curious. So I love figuring things out, figuring out how things work and how to fix things. And so whether it's like computers or household appliances or household repairs or cars or like whatever it is, I prefer to figure something out and fix it myself unless it's really, I know it's kind of beyond me. And so for years and years, it was just a matter of taking things apart and often doing more harm than good because how would I know how it worked until I removed everything, right? And then over the span of my lifetime, and this kind of tells you how old I am, something amazing happened. This little thing, maybe you've heard of this, we call it the internet. This little thing called the internet. And so now what happens is like there are people in my family who will, like something's broken, it doesn't work anymore, and they'll bring it to me and they're like, Dad, this thing, it doesn't work, it broke, this thing doesn't seem to fit, and like, can you fix it? And they give it to me. And I fix it, and I give it back to them. They're like, how did you know how to do that? Googled it. How did you know what to Google? I have this thing, and this is what it's doing. What do I do? Question mark, search. And it's like a miracle. The internet just starts spitting out page after page after page of ideas and things that, people who have weighed in on this subject. And so then it's just a matter of sifting through and sometimes like clarifying and honing. Okay, it's not this, it's that. There's blogs and there's like chat forums and then there's websites like Fixya.com and WikiHow.com. There's like all these websites. And so I'll just start reading and I'll start trying to figure things out and I'm taking my thing apart and I'm reading what they're saying. And sometimes it's really helpful, but honestly, sometimes it's really confusing because I'm like trying to triangulate. Well, this is talking about that, but this is talking about that. And they're all talking about this part, but what part is that? Is it this part or is it that part? Is it around? Am I looking at it the right way? Am I even looking at the right thing? And so sometimes it can be confusing. And then I'll find a video. An actual video of somebody taking apart the thing I'm taking apart, or at least something close to what I'm taking apart, and fixing or coming close to like something similar to the repair I need to make. There's someone in the interweb space that actually had this problem and took the thing apart and filmed themselves doing it and putting it back together and showed that on the wide world web. And I have access to it, and it's amazing. It's like they're in my living room showing me how to do it, demonstrating for me exactly how it's done. And I'll tell you, seeing somebody do it, like seeing somebody actually demonstrate it for you. If they say like a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video is worth an entire book of information and explanations. Well, today, as I said, we're in part 2 of this series, Reasons for the Season. And no doubt you've already begun to see the signs or the clings or the bumper stickers or coffee mugs or Christmas tree ornaments or the web posts that say Jesus is the reason for the season, meaning, of course, that if there had been no Jesus, there would be no Christmas. And of course, that is true. But we said last week as we kicked off the series, if Jesus was correct and if his first followers were correct, then it may be more accurate to say that we are the reason for the season. That I am the reason for the season and you are the reason for the season, which might sound kind of narcissistic and self-absorbed, but the truth is, if we hadn't been such a mess, if we weren't all such a mess, if this world wasn't such a mess, there would have been no need for Christmas. For God so loved this messy world, populated as it is by messed up, broken people like us, that he moved toward us. He was actually drawn to us instead of being repelled from us, which raises, if that's true, it raises a question. Why? Like, seriously, why would God do that? If he could have avoided the mess, and he certainly could have, and especially the way he did it. As a baby, so fragile, so vulnerable, so weak, and in a hovel, in a barn, right? Born to everyday blue-collar people. Okay, maybe if it had been like there were earthquakes and peals of thunder and lightning, and then the sky parted and this glowing figure on a glistening steed comes down from the sky with an entourage of thousands of, the strongest, brightest, best-looking warriors. Like, maybe that's how a God shows up, but this way? Like this, nobody, and we talk about the authenticity of these accounts all the time and why we can speak of them as accurate and authentic. And this is one of the reasons why nobody would have made it up this way. Nobody in this world at this time, like a carpenter and his wife, out of wedlock, mind you. Like that in of itself is off-putting, traveling away from their own hometown, and he comes as a baby and then he grows up as a carpenter, which isn't a bad job. It's just an everyday blue-collar job. And finally, he steps onto the pages of history as a rabbi and a teacher. And yes, he is doing some amazing things. There are all these great signs, but even then, in so many ways, even what he's doing that's so amazing is so unexpected and it's so upside down. And then there's the way he died. The way he died, the way he lets the mess actually get all over him and take him down. Nobody would have made it up this way. Nobody expected it to go down this way. Why would he have done it? If he could have avoided the mess, and he certainly could have, why Christmas? What is the reason for that? What is the reason, or the reasons, if you will, for the season? And that's what this series is all about. So last week, we as we said, that Christmas is that it really was, and it really is for us and for our benefit in many ways. And during this series, we're looking at 3 of those ways. And last week, we looked at the first reason for the season, that the reason for the season was to bless the world. To bless the whole messy, messed up, broken, fallen world that God loves, and that Christmas was actually the culmination of this much longer story and of a promise that God had made hundreds of years before Christmas to bless all the peoples on earth. And if you missed last week, you got to go back and check out last week. In fact, if you're watching online, just pause right here, go back, watch last week. We'll still be here when you get back. We'll wait for you. Because last week kind of sets up this whole story that God came to do something for all of us that we would never be able to do for ourselves, to set something in motion that would, as a matter of historical fact, actually be a blessing to the world. Now, today we're going to talk about the second reason for the season, if you will, and this one is easy to miss. Like, even if you've been around, church, God, faith, Jesus, that kind of journey for a while, been a Christian maybe for a while, it's so easy to miss. And to get at this, we're going to take a look at a story from Jesus' life that truly is one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite scenes from the life of Jesus, and how Jesus explained it when he was gathered with his 12 disciples on the night before he was crucified. And they had just finished with what is sometimes called the Last Supper, famous scene, right? The Passover meal. They're all sitting in a row facing the camera. You've seen the picture. And they've just finished that meal, and Jesus has washed all of their feet. And the whole night is just so emotional and really kind of strange. Jesus is acting different. We don't know what's going on with him. And then Jesus tells them he's leaving, and they're stunned. And they're like, well, let us come with you. And Peter says, like, I'll die for you. Like, let me come with you. I'll die for you. And Jesus smiles at Peter and says, oh, Peter, I know you mean well, but it's not going to turn out that way for you, bro. I'm sorry. And there's all of this emotion in the room when Jesus says, do not let your hearts be troubled. It's like, wait, what? If you're leaving, we're troubled because that bothers us. He's like, no. Don't worry. Don't let your hearts be disturbed. Hey, you believe in God, don't you? And they're like, yep, we all believe in God. Well, then believe also in me. You believe in God? Hey, believe in me. Now, can I just say, if you're ever in a room and somebody says that, just get up and leave. Don't argue with them. Don't try to just politely, quietly excuse yourself, because that's how crazy people talk. You believe in God, believe in me like you believe in God. It's like, wait, is he equating himself with God? And like Jesus does and says things all the time that blur the categories between him and God, and they're scratching their heads. And then he says something that's really quite beautiful. He says, my Father's house has many rooms, or you might say many lodgings, or many quarters, many living quarters. If it were not so, would I have told you that I was going there to prepare a place for you? And the picture here is of a big family, like a big extended family on a large estate. And the son in this part of the world, the son would go off and marry a bride, and then he would bring his bride back to his father's house, and they would build on new living quarters to the house in this larger estate. And then another son would go away, and he'd come back, and then they'd build on another room, some more living quarters, until they took up the whole cul-de-sac kind of thing. And it's this picture of this extended family, and everybody's together, and they're all in this big house together. He's going, I'm going to go away, and I'm going to prepare for a place for you, and you can trust me. You can trust me, because if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back, and I will take you to be with me, so that you may also be where I am. And they're like, okay, wait, what? So you're going, but we can't come with you, but then you're going to come back, and you're going to take us to the place where you were that we couldn't go before you came back to get us. It's like, why can't we just come with you now, Jesus? And then he says this. Then he says, and by the way, you know the way to the place where I'm going. You know the way. And they're looking at each other like, we have no idea what you're talking about right now. We have no idea. And then finally, Thomas speaks up. Now, I love Thomas. I really do. He gets a bad rap, I think. He gets this nickname, maybe you've heard it before, Doubting Thomas. He's the doubting guy. And that's so unfair, because they were all doubters. They all were. They all unbelieved. It should be like doubting Peter, doubting Bartholomew. Like, they're all doubting people. It's just Thomas. Thomas, I think, was maybe more vocal than some of them. And there are times in the scenes of Jesus' life where Thomas just seems like the emotionally honest one. He's the one that says things that everybody else is thinking. And so Thomas is looking around, and he's like, really, guys, did I miss a meeting? You guys are always doing stuff and leaving me out. And then I just look stupid. Is it, John, do you know where he's going? John's like, I don't know. Peter, was there a memo, Peter? He was like, no, I don't know what he's talking about. And so finally, Thomas raises his hand and goes like, okay, Jesus, I'm sorry. I know you're talking about something really important here, but what? Like, okay, is this a riddle? Because you're always saying these things that are kind of like riddles, and we're supposed to figure them out, but we are missing it. So you're going, and don't be troubled, because we believe in you, and you're going to come back to take us, and we don't need to worry, because we know the way. We don't know the way to where you are going. We don't know where you're going. How is it that we can know the way? And Jesus answered, and this is like spoiler alert, famous verse time. Jesus answered, I am the way. So you do know the way, because you know me, and I'm the way and the truth and the life. I am the way to the Father. I am the truth about the Father. I am the life of the Father, and you know me. And then he says something that sounds so narrow and potentially so exclusive. He says, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Or to rephrase that in positive terms, everyone who comes to the Father comes through me. And that's a point at which I think reasonably people sometimes, maybe even you, have some pushback. Like, doesn't that sound a little exclusive for any one path to say about God and how to discover who God is? Isn't it more like, and maybe you've heard this analogy before, maybe you've even thought and used this analogy, isn't it more like a group of blind men who come upon an elephant in the path? You've ever heard this analogy? They come upon an elephant and like one of them's got the trunk and one of them's got the tail and one of them's feeling along the side and one of them's got the leg. And so they're like, it's a snake. No, it's a tree. No, it's a wall. And aren't all religions a little like that? Aren't they all a little like that? Like finite human attempts to try to describe something that is beyond any of us to know or understand or to describe, that there's more to this life than we can see. Isn't it kind of like that? And the answer is, well, absolutely. It's a lot like that. Until someone who can see walks up and says, it's an elephant. Oh, it's an elephant. Oh, that makes sense of everything. Now, let me just say, if you're trying to figure out God or the Bible or faith, you're coming back to God or faith, and you're trying to work your way through it, here's how Jesus understood himself. He understood himself in this way, that my words, Jesus would say, so reveal the truth about the Father. My life so reveals the life of the Father that I truly am the way to know the Father. In other words, I am the one that makes it possible for anyone and everyone, no matter who you are or what you've done or where you're from or what you've believed, so that no one ever needs to walk in darkness or stumble around in confusion as to what God is like and what God likes and who God likes. It's not exclusive. It's clarifying. It's clarifying. If you know me, he says, no one comes to the Father through me. And then he explains, and their minds are just spinning. They're like, wait, are you saying what we think you're saying? And what he says next, this really is the reason for the season. He says, if you really know me, and this idea, it's relational. It's profoundly relational. It's like, not if you know about me, you've heard things about me, you believe ideas about me. If you know me, if you really know me, you will know my Father as well. In fact, from now on, you do know him and you have seen him. In other words, to know me is to know God, my Father, and to see me is to see my Father. Now, that sparks something for Philip, and Philip throws his hand up at this moment, and I really love this moment in the story, and he asks a question that I bet you've asked, or he asked something that I bet you've thought before, and he just blurts this out. He says, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. That'll be enough. We won't ever have to ask for anything again. We won't ever need anything again. I promise that will be enough. And at some point, I bet all of us, or almost all of us in the room, have thought this, like, if I could just know, if I could just see for certain, like one time, the skies part and God looks down and says, hey, it's me. I love you. Goes back. Like, if I just had that moment, like, then even if nothing else changes in my life, I'm still struggling to find a job, or this diagnosis continues to be what it is, or my marriage continues to be a struggle, like even if nothing else really changed, but if I knew that he was there and he knew me and he loved me, like that would be enough. That would be enough. I think I could face anything else. I think I could handle anything else. If we could just know, would you just show us the Father? Now, there's a hyperlink in the story at this point that John actually expects his readers, especially those with a Jewish background in the Hebrew Scriptures, to be able to pick up on. There's this famous scene from Moses' life that's found in an ancient document in the Hebrew Scriptures known as the book of Exodus, chapters 33 to 34. And in this scene, Moses is like, he is just fed up. He's frustrated. He's so discouraged. And he's reached this impasse. And he has this conversation with God that is raw and honest and authentic. And at the end of this conversation, he just blurts out, show me your glory. Show me your glory. Let me see you, because if I could just see you, I could face this. I could go down this mountain. I could handle what's ahead. Just show me your glory. And God says in response, I will show you my goodness. I will let my goodness pass in front of you, and you will see and experience my compassion and my grace. But no one can see me and survive it. And I can't do that to you. And so Philip is like, he's rolling the dice on the Moses prayer. It's like, if I'm ever going to get a chance to ask Jesus this, it sounds like this is my chance. Show us the Father. Like, that would give us all the confidence, all the courage we need to go on. You're leaving, you're coming, we don't know. But then we would have the courage and the confidence to face whatever we're going to face. And Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip? It's like, okay, did you understand the question? What do you mean? Don't you recognize me? Don't you see me, Philip, even after I have been among you for such a long time? It's like, wait, is he saying what we think he's saying? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say, I don't speak of my own authority. It's the Father living in me. In other words, you want to know what God says? Listen to me. Listen to me. You want to know what God thinks about this? You want to know what God would say to him or her? You know what God feels about that? What his attitude would be towards those people or towards this happening? What a person who does that, what he would say to a person who does. You want to know what God would say? Listen to me. Listen to me. I don't speak on my own authority. It's the Father living in me who is doing his work in me. In other words, you know what? You want to know what God would do? Watch me. Watch me. You know what God would do about that? You know how he would react to that? You know how he would respond to that situation or those people? You want to know how God would handle that? How God would step in? Watch me. Watch me. Watch me. Because you will never get a clearer view of who God is and what God is like and who God likes than by watching me. In other words, Jesus, this is amazing. Jesus didn't just claim to have the best explanation of God. Jesus claimed to actually be the best explanation of God. Jesus didn't claim to have the best explanation of God. He claimed to actually be the best explanation of God. Now, teachers and preachers and people like me or prophets and priests, they claim to have explanations like, this is what I think it means, and this is what I think you should do, and this is what I think it's saying, and here's more information, and let me inform you about that, and here's the way I think you should think. But Jesus shows up, and he says, I want you to look at me. I want you to look at me and watch me and listen to me because I am the explanation of God. Listen to what I say and watch what I do because that's what God would say and that's what God would do. You want to know why Christmas? Why this way? Why it happened the way it did? The reason for the season? Well, it's to bless the world, of course. And number two, it's to demonstrate what God is like, to demonstrate, to communicate, to illustrate, to explicate. I love that word, to explicate, to clarify, if you will, what God is like and what God likes and who God likes. And everything Jesus does and everything that Jesus says reveals and demonstrates and shows what God is like. If you want to know what God is like, if you want to know what God likes and what God values and who God likes, Jesus would say, look at me, watch me, listen to me. And so there's this story, one hot afternoon, Jesus meets a woman from another ethnicity, another race, at a watering hole on the wrong side of town, and everything about the setup of this story is just awkward and wrong, and he carries on a conversation with her. that makes it clear he totally accepts her. In fact, he's treating her like his peer, and even she thinks it's weird. It's like, why are you even talking to me? You shouldn't be. And then, as a part of this conversation, he places his finger on the most sensitive part of her story, her broken, shame-filled relationship with men. And Jesus goes right to that place in her life and in her story with glaring truth and reality and honesty and authenticity. And he does so in such a way that leaves her running back to her village, trying to tell everybody who rejects her and shames her in that village that they need to come and meet the man who told me everything about my life. If you want to know what God is like and what God likes and values and who God likes, watch me, listen to me. Look at me. Then one day, this desperate father comes running up to Jesus. He's like, my daughter, Jesus, she's dying. Please come and save her. And so Jesus immediately and his whole kind of crew, they began pressing their way through this town with all of its narrow streets while being swarmed by needs and crowds. And there's this woman who's been hemorrhaging blood for years. And she says to herself, if I can just get through this crowd, if I can just touch him, get to him and touch him, I know I'll be healed. And so she does. She like pushes her way and forces her way through this crowd, touching people that do not like to be touched by her. And she reaches out and she touches Jesus and she's healed. But Jesus knows it. Jesus knows it, and he stops the caravan. He stops the whole procession, and he searches her out. And she is so afraid. She is so ashamed in this moment because, A, to most religious leaders, her bleeding makes her unclean, which means anyone she touches, including everybody in that crowd, and this religious holy man, it makes them unclean as well. Plus, as a woman, she just touched a man in public on purpose. And she is so afraid. She just knows that a public shaming is about to happen to her. And Jesus sits down with her and he talks to her. He pays her undivided attention. While this poor guy whose daughter is sick is like, seriously, Jesus, can we just okay, the lady, but please, can we keep going? And he sits down with her and talks with her for long enough that according to Mark's biography of Jesus, she told them the whole truth. You have any idea how long it takes to tell somebody your whole truth? This is not an elevator pitch. This is not a 10-second conversation. He sits with her and he listens to her and gives her his undivided attention. At the end of that conversation, he affirms her to her whole community as a model of faith. He holds her up in high esteem as a model of what it looks like to believe. If you want to know what God looks like and what God likes, and who God likes, watch me. Look at me. Listen to me. Then there's this lying, cheating, no good, snake in the grass tax collector named Matthew. And Jesus invites Matthew to follow him, to join their movement, join their crew, join their group, and just come along just like that. And in fact, he doesn't actually ask Matthew to change anything. He doesn't even ask Matthew to say he's sorry. You can come, but at least say you're sorry. He just says, hey, follow me. Come on, come with us. Now, we don't like tax collectors or the IRS today. They hated them then because people like Matthew were profiteering off of the occupation of their homeland by the Roman Empire. And Peter and John, the guys, are like, what? Jesus, come here. We can't have it. People are going to think that he's one of us, which means we approve of what he does. And Jesus says, oh, you think that's bad? It's about to get a lot worse, boys, because we are going to a party at his house, and we are going to be up to our eyeballs in sinners and tax collectors all night long. You can kiss your reputation goodbye. And they're like, Jesus, doesn't that concern you? That accepting them and treating them as lovable will imply that you agree with and approve of everything they do? And Jesus is like, guys, what do you think I'm here for? Who do you think I came for? The spiritually sick and blind and lost. You want to know what God's like? And what God likes and who God likes? Listen to me. Watch me. Follow me. When he went toe-to-toe with the religious elite, when he cleared out the money changers from the temple, which is one of the more misunderstood moments in the story, I think, as the highest tier of the religious elite, the temple elite, are profiting and making bank off of the exchange rate at the expense of just everyday working class people who are just trying to connect with God, and he clears all that nonsense out. Or when he stood on the side of a mountain and said, hey, you've all heard it said, love the people who love you. Love your own people. Love your friends. Love your family. I say, love your enemies. Love the people who hate you. And do good things to people who do really bad things to you. Bless them. In fact, turn the other cheek. Give them the shirt off your back. Or when he got down on his hands and knees and washed his disciples' feet. You want to know what God is like? What he looks like? What he likes, what he values, and who God likes? Look at me. Watch me. Listen to me. But especially in the most unexpected and truly reprehensible way of them all, the night of the conversation that we were just looking at with Thomas and Philip and the guys. After that meal, they go off to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray and to chill. Apparently, it was a regular stopping point for them. And Judas, who had slipped out of the meeting earlier, he comes back with a small army. And Jesus is arrested. And they all scatter. It's like, we can't have anything to do with us. In fact, Peter denies he even knows who Jesus is. And then Jesus is dragged away. And he's dragged from trial to trial all night long, interspersed with beatings, getting punched in the face, spit on, terrible accusations all night long until the next day they lead him out of the city and they crucify him. And at that moment, they all unbelieved. They all unbelieved because whatever they thought about Jesus' connection with God and how he, who is he really, however they had tried and failed to understand what was going on, it was now super clear, not God, not from God. They were wrong. And there is no conception, no idea in the ancient world of any God or deity at all, let alone their God, that would be flexible enough, that would have the bandwidth to allow for the possibility of the deity or one of his or her agents being crucified by the Romans. And Jesus allowed it. He clearly allowed it. He didn't defend it or fight back against it. In fact, he forgave the very people who were crucifying while they were crucifying him. And they cleared out. And it was only later, after, according to all their eyewitness testimony, they saw him alive again and again, had conversations with him, ate with him, walked with him, spent time with him, that only after that, reflecting back, they came to see that there was never a moment in all the years they had known him, never a moment in all of the amazing things they had heard him say and seen him do, there was never a moment that he was actually more like God, more demonstrating what God is like than in that moment. God, your creator, your maker, on a cross, naked, publicly shamed and humiliated, beaten, spit on, covered with blood, dying, and then, yes, rising from the dead, but with the marks still on him. If you want to know what God is like, and what God likes, and who God likes, watch this. Look at this. Listen to me. Watch me. And how could we miss it? Seriously, how could we miss this? And how is it that so often people who call themselves Christians at various times have gotten this so wrong? But honestly, to be fair, so did they. They missed it as well. And years later, John is writing his memoirs, if you will, his biography of Jesus that we've been reading from today, and what it was like to be there, just what it was like to be a part of that unbelievable, amazing moment in history. And he begins his biography, a story of Jesus, recollecting and really riffing on that scene from Moses in Moses' life that Philip had alluded to that very night, where Moses on a mountain, just at his wits' end, says, "Show me your glory." And John writes in the beginning of his biography of Jesus, it's so powerful, he says, "And we have seen his glory." We have seen what Moses could have only hoped to see, what he only caught the faintest glimpse of. We have seen it. is glory. The glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. For in the past, he says, God had given us information. He had given us some instruction, and it was good. It was good information and good instructions. The law was given through Moses, and we received that instruction, but we found the instruction confusing at best and difficult. And people had a way of interpreting and complicating that instruction and information that just seemed to make it worse. And so finally, God, who loves you, who loves us, says, here, let me show you. Just let me show you. I've asked you to love me and love your neighbor as yourself, that's central to life, and it seems confusing. Like, what is love, and what does it look like, and who do I have to love? I'll love those people today. Who do I have to love those people? Here, let me just show you. I said that pursuing stuff and achievement and status and financial security on top of people and community relationships, that's messed up. It's upside down. It creates a bad world and a bad life, but it seems confusing. What does that look like? And how about my priorities? Here, let me just show you. Let me show you how to serve as if you have no care about your ego or your reputation or who gets the credit. Let me show you how to hold power and influence and what it's actually about and who it's actually for. Let me show you how to hold that in your hands without it becoming radioactive and polluting your very soul. Let me show you how to walk in God's Spirit moment by moment. Let me show you how, because I love you too much. I love you too much to leave you stumbling around in the darkness trying to figure it out yourself. Let me show you how. In the past, John says, God had given us instruction and information, and it was good. The law came through Moses, but God's truest character, who he really is, grace and truth, well, that came clear only through Jesus, the Messiah. He says, no one has ever seen God. And again, he's riffing on Moses, saying, like, you can't see me. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father has made him known. So why Christmas? To demonstrate for us so clearly what God is like, to communicate and illustrate and explicate what God is like, because God loves us. God loves you. God loves you so much, and he wants you to know, not guess, not try to figure out. He wants you to know him in such a real and personal and tangible way that he came to us to demonstrate and communicate and illuminate what God is like and what God likes and what God values and who God likes. Now, if that's true, then the best way to figure out what God is like, if you would like to figure out what God is like, is, by the way, not our circumstances. It's not our circumstances. When things go well, God feels this way to you. When things are going really terribly, he feels that way to you. John would say, our circumstances were the reason we walked away from Jesus in that moment. There was no way God could have been a part of that. You will not discover what God is like by looking at your circumstances or by our traditions. He would be like, not by our traditions. John would say, hey, our tradition, and he would speak of his own tradition, it can be very helpful, but it can also be very misleading. And the best way to figure out what God is like is not social media. It's not scrolling and TikTok and figuring out what other people say. And sadly, it's not even what religious people say, not even, sadly, what many Christians say and do. No. The best way, if John is right, the best way to figure out what God is like is to listen to and watch Jesus. Full stop. The best way to figure out what God is like is to listen to and watch Jesus, because Jesus came to demonstrate and communicate and illustrate what God is like, to make him known and knowable. So I've got some suggested homework as we wrap up week 2. Just a suggestion for you, like something to take home and maybe spend some time on this week or this Christmas season. There are 4 stories of Jesus' life, 4 biographies, if you will, of Jesus found in the documents that we call the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Pick one. any one of them and read it. Just read it. In fact, if you don't have a Bible you find easy to read, we have a bunch of free Bibles that are on our information table to your left as you're heading out. Grab one, find Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John in the table of contents. Just open it up and start reading it, and read it with the question in mind, what do I learn about the Father from the Son? If this is Jesus, what do I learn about the Father from the Son? If everything he's doing and saying is demonstrating something about who God is and what God is like and what God likes and who God likes, what do I learn about the Father from the Son? Because one of the reasons that Jesus came is to demonstrate and explicate and clarify what God is like. But to bless the world and to demonstrate what God is like are only two of the reasons for the season. We are saving the best for last. So do not miss part 3, the series finale of Reasons for the Season next week. Now, hey, on your way out, I just wanted to mention before you leave, Scott was talking to you about these Connect cards earlier. We'd love to hear from you. Everybody would love to hear from you every week. If you're our guest here, just as much information as you feel comfortable sharing. And somewhere on there, I had written the word miracle. Hey, next Saturday night, a bunch of us are going to be at Village of Hope, Orange County Rescue Mission, Village of Hope, putting on their Miracle at the Mission. If you would like to be a part of that, write miracle somewhere on that Connect card. And you can throw, all of us, we can throw our Connect cards in the offering basket on the way out. And of course, we're just a couple of weeks away from Christmas, and our Christmas teams have been growing and building wonderfully. You got a couple weekends left. This is the second to last weekend. So if you've already known, like, here's how I want to contribute and here's what I want to be a part of it, we're excited about having some great experiences and also having some great teams together doing this together. So check off a few things. You can throw that in the offering basket on the way out as well. And then, of course, your offering envelopes, if you're part of the Terra Nova family. We are really looking forward to ending this year above and beyond our budget, and when we do, we are going to give it all away. Everything above and beyond our budget. We are super excited about some of the causes we're going to be giving to, and so as you're walking out towards the end of the year, you can drop your offering envelopes in the baskets too. But let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you. I mean, it really is humbling and seriously unbelievable that you would love us and care about us so much that you didn't want to leave us stumbling around in the dark, trying to figure it out on our own. That you came to us, and the way you came to us, in the mess, letting it get all over you, to show us how and to demonstrate what you are like so we could see you once and for all. We just want to thank you that you would love us that much. And I pray for all of us as we start spending some time just looking at Jesus, reading his story, to understand you better, that you would illuminate and you would open eyes and you would clarify things for each one of us on our own journey to follow you and to discover what you're like. I pray for all of us in that regard. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. On your way out, don't forget to stop by that table and grab a bunch of stuff that Scott was telling you about. If you live in an apartment complex or any kind of housing complex where you can post stuff things, or work at a company or business where you can post things, take one of those promotional packets, scan the QR code so you have that image, and then you can just share it with people. Like, oh, here's where it is. Here, I'll just send it to you. Lots of things you can grab off the table. Of course, there are invite cards on your chairs that you can take with you as well. And then we'll see you back next weekend for part 3 of our series, Reasons for the Season. Have a fantastic week. God bless you guys.